Sometimes, as they say, the medium is the message. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. And this is your daily devotional for Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. My dad was a trial lawyer. He primarily represented public utilities and the like. I don't remember ever going to see him in court when I was growing up, but I did see him briefly argue in a federal case before a federal judge in Richmond, Virginia. I don't know, I guess I had this Hollywood idea that he would stand up, maybe pace the floor, wave his arms in the air to punctuate his points, and maybe even shout a little bit. But he did nothing of the sort. In fact, I thought he was rather boring. He spoke in a calm, even rather quiet voice, standing behind a podium as he addressed the court. I asked him about it later, and he chuckled a little bit and made it clear to me that this was a strategic move on his part. He believed it drew a sharp contrast between himself and those lawyers who did shout, wave their arms, and make impassioned speeches before the court. He felt it wasn't a weakness, but a strength. Paul says substantially the same thing about his own speaking style in his first letter to the Corinthians. He writes, "When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I did not come proclaiming the mystery of God to you in lofty words or wisdom, for I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And I came to you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. My speech and my proclamation were not with plausible words of wisdom, but with a demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might not rest upon human wisdom, but on the power of God." Remember, Paul has just written them about the whole milieu of public debate and oratory that surrounded them every day. Corinth was a fairly cosmopolitan port city, sitting in a strategically important location, both commercially and militarily. It would have attracted people from far and wide, some of whom would have come to engage in just the sort of public debates for which Greek culture was famous. As I suggested yesterday, the debaters would have been more concerned with winning than with the truth itself. People like that would have been trained to speak eloquently. They would have absorbed the rules of philosophers like Aristotle, Plato, and others, who taught the art of rhetoric, the art of speaking persuasively. That would have included not only rules of logic and how to construct persuasive arguments, but also speaking style. Against this backdrop, Paul draws a contrast between himself and the skilled orators and debaters of the day. Essentially what he's saying is the same thing my own father said about his style in court. Let others be dramatic. For my dad, he believed his persuasiveness depended on his appearing to be the calm, reasonable voice in the room. But Paul goes even farther than that. It is widely believed that Paul had some sort of speech impediment, perhaps nothing more than a funny voice. Whatever it was apparently something that made him sound simple and unpolished, perhaps even unsophisticated and unlearned. But for Paul, this was his secret power. He draws a contrast between himself as a plain-spoken orator whose message depends not on the quality of its delivery, but on the underlying truth of the message itself, and the polished orators of the day who spoke of a wisdom based on their ability to speak logically and eloquently. Paul had a different understanding of wisdom, an understanding that did not depend on eloquence. He writes, "Yet among the mature we do speak wisdom, though it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to perish, but we speak God's wisdom, secret and hidden, which God decreed before the ages for our glory." None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. We have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit that is from God, so that we may understand the gifts bestowed on us by God, And we speak of these things in words not taught by human wisdom, but by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual things to those who are spiritual. For Paul, the message of the gospel, then, is a kind of wisdom, but not a wisdom in the way that Greek culture thought of wisdom. This was not a wisdom that could be judged by the quality of someone's rhetoric or persuasive abilities. For Paul, it was a wisdom based on the inner illumination of the Spirit. It was a wisdom that spoke to the deepest needs of human life, the need for redemption and for salvation. Paul would not have won any debate tournaments. He himself admits that he was not a great public speaker, at least not when judged by the standards of that day. But he uses this fact to his advantage to claim that the power of the gospel message does not need some rather shallow metric like rhetorical prowess of the person delivering the message. Instead, the power of the gospel depends not on the preacher, but on the eternal truth. That's as true today as it was back then. Tomorrow, Paul returns to discuss the divisions within the Corinthian church. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.